Today I've got two Canon cameras. Now, both of them shoot up to 4K 30 frames per second, and both have the brand new Digic 8 image processor. This one, the SX740, costs $400, and the EOS R here costs $2,000, and that's without a lens. Add a lens, and we're talking at least another $500. But is the extra money worth it? I mean, where does all of that go? Let's find out. What's up, everyone? I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. Now, obviously, these two cameras are two totally different beasts, and they're not nearly on the same level when it comes to overall online video production or even functionality. I mean, if you're trying to get the best image quality, it's like a kitten trying to fight a tiger. But the opening joking tone aside, what I want to do today is I want to show you why certain cameras do cost more than others, even if on paper it looks like they do the same thing. I mean, like I said in the beginning, they both shoot 4K 30 frames per second, right? I get it. Before I started a YouTube channel and I started obsessing over cameras every single darn day, I used to not understand the difference either. I mean, I bought an action camera to be my very first indoor video camera, and it didn't work out that well. So if you are already a camera expert, if you know everything about cameras, this probably isn't the video for you. So the two cameras up for comparison today are really the low end of Canon's line and the current high end of Canon's mirrorless line. The SX740, which we did a whole video on Wednesday that you can see here, ding, and the initial anger-inducing but slowly gaining popularity, and I purchased one myself because I've been enjoying the heck out of it, the EOS R. Now, if you don't know much about cameras, let's get some of the basic terminology out of the way. The 740 is a point-and-shoot camera that basically means you can put it in your pocket, take it out, point it at something, and start recording. I mean, point and shoot. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's got a built-in lens. It's got a built-in everything that you could need to just use it by itself. And when I say that the EOS R is a mirrorless camera, I mean, it's as simple as there is no mirror between the camera sensor and the lens. Let's also cover the overall specs really quickly, and then in the actual comparison section, we'll be breaking it down a little more granularly. Now, the SX740 has a 1/2.3 inch CMOS sensor, and it can record in up to 4K 30 frames per second. It comes equipped with Canon's Digic 8 image processor, and for autofocus, it has a contrast-based system, and it does have face tracking if you want to use this as a vlogging camera. The EOS R, on the other hand, has a 30 megapixel full-frame CMOS sensor. I mean, that just means that the physical size of the sensor is big. I mean, look how, you saw how big this darn thing was. That's a huge sensor. Now, it can also record up to 4K 30 frames per second, and it also has Canon's Digic 8 image processor. When it comes to autofocus, it has Canon's debatably class-leading dual pixel autofocus, and it has both face and eye tracking when you update it to the latest firmware. Now, those specs, 4K, Digic 8, that all sounds pretty similar, right? It does to me. Well, let's break it down as we see how these two brackets and styles of cameras actually fit inside the three most important aspects of cameras. And before we do that, let's throw these both up on the sticks, tripods, to make them the A and B cam for the rest of the video. Dual Canon goodness. SX740, EOS R. Now, first up, video quality. Now, right off the bat, let's talk 4K. No, wait. Let's talk point and shoot versus full frame camera. So if you were paying attention during the spec overview, I mentioned the physical size of these two sensors. Now, one is obviously much bigger than the other, but why? I mean, why does it even matter, right? Well, the sensor size of a camera affects a lot of things about the image quality you're gonna get, and in a very abbreviated way that's not gonna go into too much math or science or other boring stuff, and I'm gonna get destroyed in the comments below for this. Bigger basically means quote unquote better. It's got better low light capability, better lens selection, better image quality. Now, I say quote unquote because my personal favorite sensor size is actually APS-C, which is bigger than the 1/2.3, but smaller than full frame. Full frame is great, but it buys you a few extra headaches, like being more expensive, it's bigger, and you have to deal with full frame photography people. Like, yes, it's a joke, please don't hurt me. So the real difference between the two cameras is while technically they both record the same format, the EOS R's 4K will look much better and cleaner due to its more advanced and larger sensor. But it's not totally one-sided here because the EOS R has a 1.8 times crop on top of that 4K. So if you actually want to use that, you'll need wider lenses to get roughly the same focal length. The SX over here does have a little bit of a crop, but nothing nearly as severe as the R. So for the extra price, how does the image quality differ? Now I love how the EOS R video looks. It's got a clean, sharp image. Plus, it has access to Canon C-Log, letting you get even more dynamic range out of the sensor because it will like flatten the image and protect both the shadows and the highlights. So this is what we're currently recording on C-Log on the EOS R, and this is what it looks like ungraded. Looks gross, right? Now this is more of an advanced technique than just pointing and recording, but as somebody that's recently taken a liking to C-Log, it's not as scary to grade as I would have thought. If your camera has C-Log, don't be afraid of it. The SX740 looks perfectly fine, and for its price point, I actually quite like the image you get out of it. Now I think it punches way above its sensor size because the image is great. Now when it comes to price, I think it punches about even with price because that autofocus, I don't even know if I'm in focus right now, is pretty rough. Image quality though is only half of the battle. You've also got to ensure that your audio is good enough to tell your story. Now when it comes to online content, people abandon a video for audio way faster than if you have exposure problems, a weird color grade, there's weird color grades everywhere, etc. And personally, given my tight production timeline, I will keep a clip if it has focus problems or it has exposure problems. Like right now, I assume we're out of focus because it looks like we're not in focus. But if the audio is bad and I can't save it in editing, I'll reshoot an entire video because audio is the most important. Now the SX740, as you can hear right now, has an okay built-in microphone. Now if you are vlogging and holding the camera like right to your face, yeah, it works perfectly fine, but if you're in a studio like this, it's gonna be pretty echoey because you can't direct. And I do wish the microphone on the SX740 was facing forward because then you could get cleaner sounds and less ambient noise, but I mean, it works pretty darn well for a point and shoot. The EOS R has a standard 3.5mm audio port, so you can use external microphones like we are doing right now to get pro-level vocals without having to record off camera. And a benefit of the more expensive camera is it has manual audio controls, which are so useful if you're gonna use an external microphone like we are doing right now. But okay, let's throw all of this camera theory to the test with a quick video / vlogging test so you can kind of see how all of this works when we're just like out and about. See ya out there. And welcome to the vlogging test of the cheap camera versus the expensive camera. So in this comparison, we have the Canon SX740 versus the EOS R. And yeah, there is a small bit of a price difference between these two cameras where, as we've already mentioned, the EOS R is a $2,000 camera that's not including lens, and the SX740 is a $400 camera. So yeah, what's the difference that you guys can tell right now? Well, I'll tell you what, the EOS R should look better. I mean, just objectively, it should look better. It's got a full frame lens on it. It's got a bigger microphone. I've got an ND filter on it. And the SX is just, I mean, look, I'm just holding on to it. You can see the big rig size on both cameras. Now, is the image quality on the EOS R better? Yeah, probably. I'm shooting it in C-Log. I'm gonna grade it later. The SX is just a camera that I'm just holding by itself. It's got nothing else. So is the EOS R good enough for you? Like, do you think it looks good enough to justify the extra cost? Maybe. I don't know. I guarantee the shutter speed is gonna look a little different. The motion cadence might look different. But is it 4 times worth it? Like, is it worth it by 4 times as much? I don't know that it is. But yeah, this is the vlogging test with the electronic image stabilization of the EOS R and the actual stabilization of the SX740. And yeah, here's the difference. I'll tell you which one hurts. This arm's starting to hurt. These things are heavy. Okay, back to the video. And we're back. Now, I'd say that vlogging wise, it's way easier to vlog with a point and shoot as opposed to a big full frame mirrorless camera. But like we said outside, I think the quality is better from the full frame, again, for 4 times the price. Next up, let's actually talk what is most important to me when it comes to choosing a camera for online video, and heck, it's the whole reason I have the EOS R in the first place. I mean, without a doubt, this is the reason, and that's ease of use. Now, much like audio quality, you've got to be able to quickly and efficiently be able to meet your own production timeline. And cameras these days have to be able to meet you at least halfway. Like, the camera cannot get in your way. Like, it has to be part of the team. And here's a pretty big difference. The SX does not have any manual controls for video mode, which really really sucks. If you want to do auto mode, which is how we're recording right now, I mean, then you're good. And that does make it very easy to record video. I did that myself for like a year when I first started doing YouTube. But if you want any kind of control, and if you are again new to cameras, in my opinion, the variable that's most important to control is shutter speed. If you are following the 180-degree rule, you want to keep your shutter speed at least twice your frame rate. So we are currently recording in 30 frames per second, which means we want our shutter speed to be at 1/60th. And unfortunately, the SX does not give you that option. So it doesn't even show me what our current shutter speed is. So I couldn't even dial it in. If I wanted to try to dial it in with the lighting, I can't even do that. Now, what that will get you is it makes your motion blur more natural when you're following the 180-degree rule. The EOS R has full manual controls, but it also has both aperture priority, meaning everything is on auto except the aperture, and shutter priority, same thing except the shutter. Now these modes can make it easy to decide on either to keep your aperture open at the widest if you want the shallowest depth of field, or you can set the shutter as the priority to keep your motion blur as natural as possible, and the camera will then shut the aperture to achieve that. Now, another big ease of use difference between the two is the EOS R has a fully articulating touchscreen. So you can not only quickly use the manual controls to dial your preferred settings in, if something is wrong when you're in front of the camera like right now, you can quickly reach up, tap, 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 few taps, and you're back on track. Honestly, that's the biggest problem I have with the 740 and cameras of its price point. Now, if it had manual controls for video, it would be a much easier pill for me to swallow, and if it had a touchscreen, it would be a much easier pill for me to swallow. But if you are like me a couple of years ago and keep everything in auto anyway, it might be the right amount of ease of use. I mean, seriously. When it comes to post-hitting record, there's ease of uses. I separate ease of use into before you hit record and after you hit record. Now, it does basically have all of my high notes. It has a monitor, it has stabilization, and it has autofocus. Not the best, but it has autofocus. So it's not Canon's strongest showing. It does have the face tracking, and much like we saw during the vlogging test, those three things do come together pretty well to make this a pretty good camera for after you hit record. Now, you may have wondered why this video was pretty light on EOS R ease of use coverage. And frankly, that's because the EOS R is about the easiest camera I've ever used in my life. I mean, it just speaks for itself. It's insanely easy. So let's say you decide to buy one of these cameras. What does your upgrade path / ecosystem look like? Well, the SX740 doesn't have an upgrade path. It's a point and shoot, which means what you see is what you get. For good and for bad. There is, like, if you don't like it, there's no way to make it better. But it's also not necessarily a bad thing. It's dependent on your use case. Case in point, you don't need to buy a lens to make it work. It just works. You don't need to buy an external monitor because it just works. So there are good things in it. Now, the EOS R uses Canon's RF line of lenses natively and can use EF glass through an adapter pretty flawlessly. It has cage support, and with an external recorder like the Atomos Ninja V, you can record 10-bit 422 video, which ranks this up against Canon's cinema cameras for quality of codec and file for video editing. Like, can you tell that I love the EOS R? But at the end of the day, yes, the most expensive camera is better. I mean, it's better handling, it's easier to use, and it has the better image quality. I mean, the purpose of this video, like I've said the whole time, wasn't to try and say that the cheaper camera is better, because it's not. It was more to explain why cameras can have such vastly different costs despite having similar seeming specs. Now, both of these cameras will work for certain groups of individuals. Now, personally, I think the EOS R might be one of the best online content creation cameras ever made. And it's definitely worth its cost now that it even has a price cut. But your mileage may vary, and the SX740 might be the perfect camera for you because it looks great, is easy to use, and is super tiny. Thanks for watching.